With the G14 a few days away, and yes, it isn't the G20 anymore because a lot of countries aren't sending their leaders, we've been talking a lot about the narratives in South Africa and how the ANC has desperately tried to regain control of the narrative. With AfriForum and Solidarity putting up posters, literally plastering Johannesburg with posters about South Africa being the most race-regulated country in the world, this has the ANC in a bit of a flat spin. This has also meant that the ANC has been desperate to celebrate any and all victories that they can, even if those victories aren't necessarily clean-cut victories. Now, it's not just the ANC that does this, it's pretty much every country in the world. This is why whenever you look at inflation data, it's no longer really trustworthy. You see, if you go back 40 years and you go to like the 1980s, 1970s, even the 1960s, we used to track inflation using what is known as the basket of goods. This was a set basket of goods that people would buy, generally speaking, going into a supermarket. And this allowed us to track year after year what is the change in the prices of these goods. Then governments got clever and governments said, well, actually, people's needs adapt. And therefore, we also have to adapt the number of stuff or the goods that we put into the basket. Now, you might say, but that is actually clever. You know, very few of us are still going out and buying pipe cleaners, for example, just because very few people smoke nowadays, or at least fewer people smoke nowadays, and very few people actually smoke pipes. So, yes, that is correct. The problem, however, with this new methodology is that whenever something gets a little too expensive, what governments around the world will do is they'll just remove it from the basket because they'll say, well, no one's going to buy this. It's way too expensive. That is why you can sometimes end up with a basket of goods that includes no red meat because red meat is surging in price and therefore no one is buying it because no one actually has the money. One would think that that's important to track for inflation data, considering the fact that, well, people need red meat. And if no one's eating the red meat because it's too expensive, that means we have an inflation problem. But thanks to this new methodology, governments are able to endlessly game what the official inflation numbers actually are. The same is done with unemployment. You have the official unemployment numbers, and then you have what is known as the expanded unemployment numbers. And these two numbers are not to be trusted because neither of them actually goes to the heart of the question, how many people are not working in your economy? But oftentimes, luckily with unemployment, we can actually look at the actual economic growth, the actual number of people that are participating in the workforce, and we can sort of derive for ourselves what that official number would be. We do the same with inflation, but it is obviously much, much harder because you'll oftentimes have differences between areas and the like. But okay, so on to the good news. Cyril Ramaphosa and the ANC busy before the G20 because now is the time to let the world know that South Africa is open for business, decides to say, dear fellow South Africans, or just South African. I don't know who he's talking about, but he is only speaking to one South African in particular. I'm going to say me. Maybe he's been thinking about me. I love that. Thanks, Cyril. In the week that we prepare to host the first summit of the G20 on African soil, we are able, we are able to showcase a country and an economy on the rise. A number of key economic indicators and developments in the past week point to the green shoots of an emerging economic recovery. This is a vast overstatement of what has actually happened, but never mind. So I decided to read the letter. It's one of these shorter ones, which is actually very much appreciated. Thanks, Cyril. Since you're only speaking to me, I'm going to say you kept it brief because hearing from you has never been one of my all-time favorite things in this world. But okay, so he starts off by saying that there's been a number of key economic developments that points to economic recovery in South Africa. Like, for example, unemployment is down. In fact, it's down to 31.9% between July and September of this year, and that's down from 33.2%. That's a good thing, except when you actually dive into the numbers. You see, because the numbers actually reveal something rather telling. When you look at where these jobs came from, it comes mostly from the construction industry, about 130,000, from community and social services, about 116,000, and also from trade, about 108,000. The problem with all three of these industries, a lot of government control goes into this. Johannesburg just went out of their way to spend untold billions of rands fixing at least the parts of Johannesburg that the world leaders will see. It's very simple or very easy that a lot of those jobs may actually come from whatever money Joburg spent. And remember, when Johannesburg spends money, it's not spending its own money. Johannesburg isn't a business, it is a government, and therefore it is spending your money, my money, in order to give to other people that will then spend our money in whichever way they seem or deem fit. Community and social services, that's 100% a government position. So the government employed about 116,000 more people, and then 108,000. If you go to the actual methodology that the Labour or the Stats SA followed, they actually tell you here that they decided to also include a lot of informal jobs in these official statistics. The problem with that is a lot of informal jobs are not trackable. So you don't even know if the jobs that you're attributing is an actual job. That's why it's a very silly thing to try and include informal jobs. Not to mention the fact that an actual official at Stats SA said that, well, in the third quarter of every year, we sort of see a rise in the unemployment rate of South Africa, or a dip rather. So almost always in the third quarter, it gets a little bit better. And it kind of makes sense. The same is true, by the way, for any economic growth that they seem to be forecasting, because that's the other thing they're celebrating here. There's a forecast of increased economic growth. Yes, the economy of South Africa tends to grow a little bit better just before the holiday seasons. That makes sense. It's Christmas coming up. People are buying gifts and people are spending a little bit more money, treating themselves to maybe a holiday if they can afford it. So yeah, there's going to be some economic growth. But considering that the first two quarters of this year saw 0.1% economic growth, unless the South African economy is about to grow at about 3.3% in the next quarter, we're not going to see any real economic growth year on year, which is usually where you want to focus. But then when you look at the actual unemployment rate, you have to also look at the expanded unemployment rate. This would include people who don't want to work or who are no longer looking for work. So they have lost interest in trying to find a job because there simply is none. So you look at the official unemployment rate and you see, oh, wow, that's a dip of 0.2 percentage points. But then the expanded unemployment rate, in other words, people who have given up on trying to find a job, has actually increased by 0.5 percentage points. So really, unemployment is worse than what it was a year ago, but it's better when you look at the official numbers that the department themselves have admitted. They have a new expanded methodology for tracking unemployment. So these numbers are completely, well, it's a fugazi for the most part, right? He also harps on about how the S&P have finally improved our credit rating in about 20 years. That is actually pretty good. But then again, you look at the S&P upgrades and you look at why they decided to upgrade the South African economy. And again, it's a lot of sort of forecasting. And if you think about why we were downgraded in the first place, the only real thing that the ANC has been able to achieve that convinces the S&P that, well, South Africa is still not investment grade because we're only BB minus now. To be investment grade, we have to be at least B. But, you know, the fact of the matter is it kind of looks better. And therefore we say, okay, energy, right? Eskom has seemingly kept the lights on. This, of course, is disputed, as we have a lot of people talking out and speaking out and saying, hey, we're burning a lot of diesel to keep the lights on. In fact, Eskom is going into massive debt, trying to service all of this nonsense and trying to keep all of these lights on, because Eskom isn't building any new power stations, and Eskom's energy availability factor is still not 70%, which has been the goal for about 10 plus years at this point. It's still not there. It's about 65% at the moment. And again, that's according to their official numbers. That's not according to anything that we can tangibly track, at least not at the moment. And Eskom is being very mum on the amount of diesel that they are or are not burning. Now, the one good thing that I will give the ANC here is Operation Vulindlela, however the hell you pronounce that name. But this is an operation that the ANC implemented in 2020, where there's a new group or a new committee that has been formed in the presidency of South Africa. And this group is trying to reform the government of South Africa, and they're trying to digitalize a lot of things, and they're trying to streamline things like visas and e-visas and making it easier for businesses to actually do business in South Africa. The problem with that is they never focus on the things that actually matter. You look through this entire document, and I've read through the whole thing, there's not a single word on education. There's not a single word here on skills development. There's not a single word here on BEE or making BEE more streamlined so that more businesses are like to invest in the economy. And that really is one of the big deals. That's one of the big things that we should be focusing on. BEE is a tax on doing business in South Africa. That by definition destroys the ability for businesses to actually do business, and it makes it harder for businesses to open up in South Africa. But the ANC will not renege on any of those things. This entire thing, it's celebrating an empty shell. There's no actual tangible evidence that the South African economy is actually growing. When you look at economic growth, it's a forecast. And I would just note that every single year, all of these credit rating agencies forecast that South Africa is going to grow at 1.5%, 1.9%, 2% even. It never reaches that, right? Our own Reserve Bank continuously goes, oh, South Africa's economy is going to grow at 1.5%, and then we see 0.7% growth. We've never been able to hit the economic growth rates that the world forecasts, and that is because the world forecasts based on the best possible scenario. The ANC is the worst possible scenario in South Africa, so anyone who doesn't include the ANC in their forecasts is bound to be wrong. Everything is looking good right now because the ANC needs to put a good foot forward. They need to show the world that South Africa is open for business because, hey, visitors are coming. And when visitors are coming, you clean your house, as Ramaphosa himself have said. This is just par for the course. Is it going to do anything? Are we going to see these sustained, newfound economic effects in South Africa? Is the ANC actually going to start delivering services? I highly doubt it. I highly doubt that there's going to be any lasting change to this. Because as soon as the visitors go home, they'll just let the house fall apart again until the next round of visitors show up. Anyways, those are my opinions. You can share your opinions in the comment section down below. If you like what I do and you think more people should have access to it, please consider hitting the like button, hitting that subscribe button, and sharing this video with as many people as possible. Massive shout out and thank you to all of the patrons as well as the YouTube channel members. To become a patron, link in the description down below or join button right below this video. As always, I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace.